Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Feel Good Weddings podcast by Polka Dot Wedding. My name is Dorothy, otherwise known as Miss Polka Dot, and I'm the founder and editor. We believe in seeking out content that is inclusive and diverse so that everyone can see themselves in the stories that we tell. We've done this for 15 years through the written word, and now we want to have those chats in voice through a podcast. Can't wait to take you along for the ride. The Polka Dot Wedding team is honoured to conduct our work on the land of the Boonwurrung, Woiwurrung, Eora and Kurungay people. We honour the traditional Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander custodians of the land, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. Welcome back to another episode of the Feel Good Wedding podcast. I am so thrilled for today's episode because one of my favourite parts about Polka Dot Wedding is our theme issues. We take a month, we take a theme, and we deep dive into everything to do with that theme. It might be entertainment, it might be cakes, it might be flowers. In fact, it could even be a colour. The yellow issue is amazing because it was all about sunshine. But this month, we're talking country weddings. Now, a couple of us at Polka Dot Wedding have been born and bred in the country, so a country wedding is near and dear to our heart, and it's also near and dear to the heart of today's guest. Kirsten Cunningham is a beloved Polka Dot Wedding member, but she's also a country wedding photographer based out of Orange in New South Wales. Today, Kirsten is sharing with us everything you need to know about a country wedding, from what you need to think about when catering to your guests, from what you need to think about when you're choosing your wedding venue, choosing your vendors, the perks, the cons, the pros, everything to do with a country wedding. And it's a really valuable chat if you're thinking, maybe I don't want to get married in a city. Can't wait for you to hear this one. So let's get settled in, grab your favourite beverage, cup of tea, glass of wine, and let's do it. Hello, Kirsten. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Now, for those of us that don't know you, please introduce yourself and tell me all about what you do in the wedding industry.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, my name's Kirsten Cunningham. I'm a photographer based in Orange, New South Wales, which is about 4 hours west of Sydney, and I specialise in wedding photography.
So tell me a little bit about Orange because it is a really beautiful town, especially in autumn. So can you tell me a little bit about Orange and what you love about it?
Yeah, for sure. So Orange they call it the colour city. So we're quite high. We're about 900 metres above sea level. So we do get snow on Mount Canobolas in winter, and lots of people come here for the high altitude wines in the vineyards. It's so beautiful. I know, like surrounded by vineyards. How lucky am I? And in the country. So good. But Mount Canobolas is like an extinct volcano. So there's like really mineral rich soil, and that kind of supports all this amazing produce. Like, we grow saffron and apples, and there's cider producers, wine, cheese, coffee, truffles, beer. It's insane. It's so beautiful. And of course, like with all of that, like amazing food and wine and produce, there's this incredible destination wedding industry that is supported by that, where my clients come in and they often bring like 100 people into town from all over Australia and the world just to have that real weekend experience. And obviously all the locals get married here too, because it's just awesome. There's so many cool things to do. Not a lot of Orange people get married outside and have their own destination wedding unless they're beach obsessed or something. So it's a beautiful town.
You sold me on it. So why would you want to go anywhere else?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So what city weddings and country weddings, especially in Australia, are very different. They're two sides of the coin. So what do you love most about country weddings?
Yeah, and I guess I want to qualify that by saying I did actually work in the wedding industry in Sydney for a couple of years. That's where I started my career. And I'll never forget, the stress of, I was second shooting, so I wasn't the associate shooter, but so I was working for another photographer. But we would have the ceremony at a church in the inner west, and then we'd drive to the rocks and try and find a car park. We had 5 minutes to find a car park on a busy Saturday, and then get out of the car and then get back in the car and then go to location number 2 for portraits. And then by the time you get to reception, you're just so worn out. And we were the photographers, and the couples like taking their bridal party to to all of these places. Portrait sessions are often 2 hours long just because you have to account for all the travel if you're not staying on site.
Yep.
And I'll just never forget the stress and the hecticness of it. And the other thing that I absolutely love about country weddings and working in Orange, where if they are two different sites between ceremony and reception, it's a 10-minute drive between the two sites. The stress levels are really low. But also that in the city, I just remember thinking like it's such a missed opportunity for guests to spend time together outside of the actual wedding day. So like a lot of my clients are either Sydney or Canberra based, or some have even grown up in Orange, moved to Brisbane or Perth and then come back to Orange and then brought all of their friends and family together. But they kind of have this beautiful sense of community around the wedding as well. So, there's Friday night, there's a beer and pizza night at one of the pubs. And then Saturday's this beautiful wedding. Often they'll have a breakfast with immediate family or something the morning of the wedding. And then afterwards, there's this recovery brunch at this beautiful Airbnb with bacon and egg rolls on the barbecue, or a brunch at a vineyard. And, I just really remember being struck by that when I started working in Orange, how being in Orange or being in the country and bringing all of your guests into a little small country town really gives them that immersive experience. But also, it gives them that beautiful weekend away of chilling out and having fun. But it also allows all of the guests, friends and family to interact. And so they walk away from the weekend really feeling like your community is very connected to each other and they know each other. And, your best friends have met your uni friends and your uni friends have met your parents and, all of that kind of stuff. And I'll never forget thinking in Sydney or in the city, just like there's that real missed opportunity to bring people together because everyone kind of just disappears.
Yep. And I think like so many Sydney couples choose the typical places like Southern Highlands and Hunter Valley, etc., which are beautiful, but it sounds like there's so many more regions in New South Wales, particularly, and every other state, obviously, that are underloved but have so much to offer for a wedding.
Yeah, definitely.
And so much food.
Yes, I know. And I don't there's a reason that the Hunter Valley and Bowral and the beautiful venues in Sydney on particularly, like Gunners Barracks and all these beautiful harbourside venues. There's a reason that they're popular because they're absolutely beautiful and they do a damn good job at what they do.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. Like the other thing is country weddings are often a lot less expensive than city weddings because you don't have all of those big tariffs put on there. And country venues particularly, will offer really good packages for people because they're either they're not under the pump all the time. They do their other things, and weddings it's not a hobby. I don't want to misrepresent it, but it's not the core of their business. Like a lot of the vineyards here in Orange, weddings is part of the hustle, but it's not the main hustle, if that makes sense. So they're not stressed
and
about
that was going to be
charging as much as other venues who only do weddings might be.
And that was going to be one of my questions to you is what are the perks of the city versus country weddings? Because you said costs, and one of the reasons, I suppose, apart from the fact that it's not their main thing, is that overheads are just a little bit lower as well. You're not contesting with harbourside rents, etc. So it can be less of a budget hit. So what are the other perks that you think of a country wedding?
Yeah, I mean, in a place like Orange where the wedding scene at the moment has that best kept secret kind of vibe, like lots of my couples are coming to Orange for a weekend away, discovering how awesome it is, and then deciding to get married there 2 years later, and bring all of their family and friends there. So I remember one couple recently, they checked, and this is not standard practice by any means, but I was just blown away at how cool it was. They literally went through all of their friends' Instagrams to see if any of them followed the vineyard that they wanted to get married at in Orange. And when they realized that no one had, they were like, yes, because we want people to have that wow feeling. We want them to have an experience, not just to watch us get married. And I think that was really eye-opening for me because it really solidified that idea that, getting married in the country is about you having that time away from your normal life. If you're talking about a destination wedding, obviously locals still get to experience everything, but also bring people that you love into a world that you want them to experience and share with them. So chilling out in Airbnbs. Orange is quite cold, so like little Airbnbs with fireplaces and drinking red wine and, you know, all of that kind of thing. But cost is a really big one. The experience of and allowing your guests to have not like a wedstival, like a lot of places, and it's so cool. Like I love that concept so much, but like a real wedding weekend, I suppose. And there are seriously talented vendors that live in the country. Like there's not as many as there is in the big cities, but they're just as good. And it's really exciting to see. Like in Orange, we've got 3 or 4 amazing florists, 3 or 4 amazing celebrants, 3 or 4 amazing photographers, videographers, you name it. And I guess that's the biggest challenge about getting married in the country.
I was going to say that would make it hard, wouldn't it, to find the right vendors?
Yes. Well, yes,
but you have really good communities, don't you, in the country? The vendors that we work with in the country areas are really tight knit, and they all support each other and they all recommend each other. Yeah, definitely. And you have to, because, you know, you need someone to have your back if the shit hits the fan, basically. So, and I think this is straight, like, and I'm not speaking about all of country New South Wales, obviously, but Orange particularly, and particularly after COVID, we had a really high influx of people migrating basically from Sydney out to Orange. And that's always existed. But a lot of the main wedding vendors here are from the city. They understand city clients. They understand what expectations are. They understand the quality of work, and they've brought all of that experience from the city out to the country. And the industry as a whole is getting better and better. Not saying that people who haven't lived in the city can't do it, because that's totally untrue, but there's this real connection and understanding with clients from all different types of demographics, I suppose. Do you find that the country has changed the way that you shoot as a photographer? How has it influenced your work?
Oh, yes, definitely. Look, natural light is my jam. It's my thing. I started my photography career in natural light portraiture in Sydney, photographing preschool kids, strangely, but that taught me a lot about kids and personalities and natural light. So natural light is really something that it heavily influences my work. And every time I drive around Orange, or I actually work in Mudgee in the Blue Mountains in Dubbo and Bathurst as well, I do travel. But there's nothing like the light with huge horizons, soft pastel colours of eucalypts, you know, cherry blossoms as well in spring, which we're seeing in Orange, those autumn colours that you mentioned before with that beautiful, the colour and the light is just absolutely spectacular. And I guess I generally am always looking for beautiful light and quite simple compositions that show off how beautiful the venues and the locations that my couples have chosen, because they're not here for industrial architecture. They're not here for the rocks in Sydney or to have the Harbour Bridge in the background. They really want to show off that experience and that immersion in the country, in these beautiful colours, in the particular season, especially with Orange, or somewhere like the Blue Mountains, where quite often I'll do tiny little elopements on the escarpment, and it's just like kilometres of beautiful valleys and eucalypt trees and cockatoos being crazy. So definitely influenced heavily by the environment, and trying to really focus on the light and the simplicity of the compositions that I shoot.
So you really sold me on the country wedding. You sold hopefully all the listeners on a country wedding. So let's get into like the nitty gritty. So what should couples think about when they're planning a country wedding? Because we talked about like there may be kind of less availability with suppliers. You've got to think about your guests coming in. You've got to think about distances with venues. There's like what are all the different things that couples should consider?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I guess the answer might be a bit surprising to some people, particularly in terms of transport. The biggest concern with transport is actually flying people in, I feel. So, you know, the regional to regional flights can be a real headache. So again, going back to that concept of having a weekend away and encouraging people, I remember guests trying to fly from Rockhampton via Brisbane, via Sydney, to Orange, and, one of those flights got delayed and they were 9 hours late. So just really trying to give your guests a heads up and a little bit more information, and trying to maybe encouraging them to get here a little bit earlier and creating that multi-day experience rather than a single day experience. Once you're actually here, though, it's phenomenal. You can drive from one side of town in Orange to the other in less than 10 minutes. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will get buses to get all their wedding guests to meet, say, at the information centre in town, bus them out to the venue, which is only 15 minutes away, and then offer that return bus. And most of the accommodation in town is within walking distance to the information centre. So it's a really, really great way to keep your guests safe. But the country road fatalities are a really big thing, and you really want to take that seriously.
Yes.
And there's not enough cabs in small towns, and Uber is kind of still hasn't come into country towns like as heavily as it has in the city. But there's not as many cabs, but there are lots of cops, if that makes sense. So you want to keep your guests safe.
Yes.
But organising a bus is a really, really easy way to do that. All the school buses just turn into wedding buses on the weekends, and it's actually not that expensive. So I guess that's a big thing.
So obviously, as a country wedding vendor, you recommend local vendors where possible over necessarily bringing city vendors in. So if there are only a couple of city vendors that are amazing, as opposed to the hundreds and thousands that there might be in the city, what are your recommendations for finding those country wedding vendors and making sure that they're at the quality and all that kind of stuff when it comes to maybe planning it from away, etc.? What are your tips for country wedding vendors?
Yes, a really good question. Look, supporting local is always so important. Otherwise, the industry can't exist. So local vendors have that insider knowledge and connections, and they have the community around them to problem solve and support them. But like I said, in a community where there are handfuls of vendors in the wedding industry in each particular category, and you don't have that oversupply like you say do in Sydney or Melbourne. On a peak weekend, we absolutely welcome out of town wedding vendors, because otherwise the industry can't exist either. So the beautiful thing that I love about Orange is the quality of wedding vendors is really high. And on a peak weekend here, there might be 20 weddings. And if you've only got 4 local wedding photographers or 3 or 4 florists that can do a few weddings each, it's absolutely necessary to bring in people from other parts to come in and work in the wedding industry. And we're so lucky because we're only 4 hours west of Sydney. So often people from Western Sydney, the Blue Mountains, Dubbo, Mudgee, everyone's kind of working across the region together, and we get that really beautiful cross-pollination, I suppose, between all these little micro destination wedding areas, which is beautiful. But look, if you absolutely want to support local wedding vendors, there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. Obviously, booking early is a really big thing. The other thing that COVID has taught us is flexibility. So think about having your wedding on a Friday. So often a Friday midweek, the Tuesday after a long weekend, just get a little bit creative with your dates. And often you'll have your choice of vendors if you're getting married on a Friday instead of a peak Saturday wedding. Yeah. Just some really, really simple tips there. And again, using that as a way to get your guests to have an immersive experience in the little tiny country town that you're bringing them to, and to have that experience there, rather than, getting in on the Saturday morning, leaving on the Saturday night, getting out of there, and everyone's exhausted because they've just driven 4 hours back and forth.
Oh, gosh, exactly. Is there anything we have to really consider when it comes to availability, not just with vendors being booked out or not, but things like food or bringing in particular styling elements or flowers when you are so far? I mean, I know it's only 4 hours, but it still is 4 hours from the city.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I always think about, one of the leading wedding industries at the moment is in Perth. The things that are coming out of Perth are absolutely phenomenal. And yes, Perth is a city of 2 million people, but it's so isolated from the rest of the world.
It is, yeah.
And I think about that all the time, saying, well, if they can do this leading designs, styling, florals, such contemporary, beautiful, wedding, everything wedding, right? I absolutely love everything that's coming out of Perth. I'm if they can do it as a town of city of 2 million people, so isolated from the rest of the world. We're 4 hours from Sydney. There's absolutely no reason, if we're not doing it already, that we aren't able to do that as well. And
yes, when you put it like that.
Yes. And, there's all of these different elements here too. Like in Sydney, you've obviously got the flower markets, but in Orange, you have the growers. So our florists are actually going directly to the growers to get things that are in season. It's all like farm to table or, farm to wedding with not just florals, but produce as well. You've got the vineyards, and just thinking about also the environmental impact of that as well. So particularly in Orange, where there's a lot of growers, or the Blue Mountains, or in Mudgee, Dubbo, anywhere actually, you've got the growers that live here. Florists are sourcing things directly from the growers. You've got the restaurants that are sourcing things directly from the farms around here as well, and they're producing the wine on site. So it's this really beautiful, low carbon footprint, and also supporting that farm to table and supporting local produce as much as possible. And the things that you can do with those combinations here are things that you can't see at, cliffside wedding venues in Sydney, because they don't have access to the same things that we'd have access to. So it's a little bit of
And that's such a good point, because I was thinking, we've got to bring in everything from the major cities instead of what is around us and what are the vendors that are around us, the produce, the flowers, where actually this stuff is being grown and made and being shipped off to Sydney. Yeah. It's such a good point that you should just be looking very much at your local vendors and the local suppliers and the local food producers and flower producers, etc., and make the most of it.
Yeah, definitely. And look, there are definitely things that you can't get in the country that you have access to in the city. And there is absolutely no issue with bringing those out. It's quite difficult out here to get a particular type of chair if it hasn't already been used before for styling.
Yes.
So, but often everyone's so well connected. Again, where we are, we're only 4 hours from Sydney. So we have access to that. And particularly if clients really into design or styling, quite often they'll have people bring things up or get people to bring things up for them. But often we kind of see clients and couples working with what exists already and then really putting their flair into it.
Yep. What should we keep in mind when we're booking the ultimate vendor, I suppose, in the country, the venue? Because it is a little bit different, I think, to booking a city venue.
Oh, why is that? Why do you think it's different?
I feel like, there's much more availability in the city. You're tending to maybe the offerings are a little bit different. You've got beautiful wineries in the country. You've got beautiful barns. You've got maybe churches on one side of town to the other side. There's less around of them. So I feel like there's a bit of a difference with booking country venues. It's the same as booking country vendors, I suppose. It's just less availability. Is there stuff that we should keep in mind with that?
Yes, that's a really good question. Yes, definitely, I suppose. Look, and I guess the reason I was like, wow, why do you say that? Is because I guess I see the variety here, because so many of my weddings are marquees on the top of a hill in a private property, or someone's sheep shed, like someone that they know, or a wedge shed venue, or one of the vineyards, or one of the most beautiful venues here is actually like an old dance hall that people hire out that's got like a little dock and a little lake, and then they bring all the styling and all the catering, and there's a big kitchen out the back. So there's all these really different types of venues in Orange particularly that suit different budgets, that suit different types of clients. You can still have your beautiful rustic country wedding, or you could have a high-end glamorous vineyard wedding, and those will all exist in exactly the same weekend during spring and autumn as well. So if you do have a really particular aesthetic, again, it's just booking early and having a look around, I suppose. And if you feel like you might have missed out on the venue that you thought that you wanted, either looking at flexible dates, like again, some of the venues will actually offer tiered pricing for midweek and Friday weddings. So you might actually find that, say, one of the wineries, a lot of the wineries, their cellar door is the busiest on a Saturday, and they're quite reluctant to close the cellar door because long term they make more money from clients joining the wine clubs than they do from having a one-off wedding on that day. So, but a lot of the cellar doors and the wineries will offer tiered pricing, and So it's cheaper for you to get married on a Friday, which means that they don't have to close their cellar door.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess it's just about working out kind of what vibe or what style of wedding that you want. Do you want to hire a hall and get all the styling in there and do your own thing? Would you really want to sell a door? Are you happy to get married, say, on the Sunday of a long weekend where people have got the Monday to drive back home? Or I guess just kind of really thinking a little bit outside the box, if you know, not outside the box, because I feel like people already do that anyway, but just thinking about things, all right, well, how can we make this work? Could we get married on a Friday? Could we get married in September instead of October? What if we get married in January rather than mid-December? Or just looking at dates and different types of venues. What if we had this, instead of hiring a vineyard cellar door, what if we hired an apple packing shed and right next to the vineyards and did this cool thing?
It seems like in some ways we've actually got more choice of venues than in the country, because in the city there aren't as many blank canvas venues, but in the country you can just go get married in an apple packing shed, or you'll find the space on a lawn to do an amazing marquee, whereas you don't quite have that same flexibility in the city because everything is so tightly packed.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, I've seen so many beautiful creative city weddings, and I guess I am very conscious about generalizing, and because I love this. I love Sydney. I love being in the city. Yes. I love Melbourne. I love Brisbane. Love Perth as well, I promise, obviously, because I was raving about it before. But yes, you're right. There's like a different, I guess the perception is that there's limited availability. The quality of the vendors isn't as high at the city. There's limited access to things, all of these things that we've been talking about. And I guess I really feel like the opposite is true. And as soon as people start like inquiring and really wrapping their heads around what's going on out here and getting a bit of a feel for what they like and what's on offer, I think people would be really pleasantly surprised about how much cool stuff is out here and what they do have access to.
Yeah, and you touched on the quality of the vendors being a myth, because it is a myth, and it is one that floats around about, well, we have to bring city vendors in because, you know, we can't get the quality, we can't get the on-trend stuff, we can't get the, you know, the latest things, all that latest styling, all that kind of stuff with a country wedding if we use country vendors. So let's dispel the myth and get rid of it. And what are some of the examples of beautiful things you've seen at country weddings and the amazing stuff that you've been like, yeah, this is why you should book a country vendor?
Oh my gosh, there's just so many. I guess the big thing is country vendors travel too. So some of the best country wedding photographers work all through Western Queensland, all through Western New South Wales, you know, and they service that entire area because that's what they're absolutely passionate about. And they will get there rain, hail or shine and be at your wedding, you know, and that's their client base because the kilometres are so huge and that's what they specialise in.
Yes.
So just because you're getting married, say in a private property out the back of a mining town that doesn't have a big wedding industry, yes, there might not be local in that town wedding vendors, but there will be a whole like wealth of other wedding vendors in surrounding towns that bring really high quality and a really beautiful experience to your wedding. And they will all travel because we're in the country. We have to do lots of kilometres.
We're used to it.
We're used to it. That's what we do. So, and a lot of people as well have worked in the city before and they're bringing that experience and that lifestyle or chasing the lifestyle out in the country and bringing all of their experience out here. So I guess it's really tricky. Obviously, there's not that really hard-edged competitiveness, but that doesn't mean that the people who are working in the industry don't care about what they do and making sure that they're doing the best bloody job that they can.
You keep selling it to me now. There's no competitiveness, lots of space, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, everyone will be moving out here.
Sounds pretty much like a dream. Yeah.
Everyone will be moving out here to get married.
Though, isn't that the problem?
I know, yes. It is the problem and the solution, I suppose, yes.
So you mentioned earlier about making sure or encouraging couples to book a whole weekend worth of celebrations because it is just makes it so much better for your guests. But what other things can we do if we are having our guests fly in for a destination wedding, apart from maybe doing that whole weekend worth of planning? Is there anything else that we can think about with transport? You mentioned the buses and getting venues far apart, all that kind of stuff, accommodation, information. Is there anything else we can do to help our guests at a country wedding?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And there are so many beautiful little micro wedding websites that people have access to these days, that clients have access to. So, they can set up their little website, literally ring, quite a lot of people will literally ring the information center and say, all right, well, how do I get from point A to point B? What's open on a Monday night for dinner or a Sunday night for dinner? Can you tell me? And so then they list all of that information on this beautiful little wedding website that they have for themselves, that guests have access to, and then guests just go out and do their things. And I don't want to scare clients in terms of, you do not have to organize every single one of your guests for the whole weekend. I'm not suggesting that at all. But, like booking in a pub for 50 people on the Friday night for beer and pizza, and just letting people show up if they want to, or maybe organizing picnics or a barbecue or something out at one of the vineyards, or if anyone's got a big Airbnb, just inviting everyone to come over and have bacon and egg rolls on the Sunday morning. So it's just, you're organizing things, but it's not a lot of work for you. And it might be that in part of your early wedding planning progress, really thinking about the things, where are you actually having your ceremony? Do you want to have it in the church in town? And if so, can your guests go across the road to the pub on the day that you've got it? Is the pub going to be open? Can they get some food there? And then where are they going to catch the bus from to get out to your reception venue? What time do you want the buses to come home? Do you want one to go, say, at 9:30 for the older people, and then another one to go at 11? What do you want? And just like kind of mapping that out, whacking it all up on this beautiful little website. Everyone has access to that information, and then letting your guests have the choice about where they want to engage and jump in and jump out.
Yep. Do we have to do anything, or should we think about anything to do with accommodation for guests, or are you suggesting maybe they just book their own? Is there anything we can do to make that a little bit easier?
Yes, definitely. And I guess in Orange, there's a wealth of accommodation. You're always going to be able to find somewhere to stay. There's a lot of Airbnbs. There's a beautiful Quest hotel with a lot of rooms. There's a few really beautiful boutique hotels. A lot of the Airbnbs can fit like 10 people in them as well. So groups of people will go and book. We also have a few different accommodation providers like Book Orange. Obviously, there's Airbnb, there's Your Stays, there's the different hotels. There's lots of different providers and opportunities in Orange. When I work in Mudgee, though, it's different. Accommodation, there's not as much accommodation, and it can be quite difficult to get reasonably priced accommodation, even like a month or two out from the wedding. So I guess that's just another question that couples want to ask, the venue or their vendors, and maybe just encourage your guests, if they're getting married in Mudgee, encourage their guests to book accommodation much earlier rather than later. But in Orange, that problem doesn't exist. I guess sometimes I work at private property weddings where it might be, say, half an hour, 40 minutes out of town. And the town that couples are getting married at might not have a lot of accommodation options. So they'll literally say to their guests, you have these 3 options. Please make sure that you get accommodation here. If not, you're welcome to camp at the farm. Please bring, all your camping gear or whatever. So there's a few different options there. And often the youngins will like just get the swags out and, camp in the paddock and that kind of thing, or crash in the lounge room. But particularly for guests that are flying interstate, making that clear to their guests. And again, it's just the couple kind of just sussing out how it's all going to work. It's not a ton of work. It's just a couple of very well-directed questions, getting some really good answers, and then making sure that your guests have access to that.
So it sounds like the key to a really good country wedding is to make sure you do everything as early as possible when it comes to thinking out what you want, booking the vendors, telling your guests to book your accommodation, giving them all the information you need. It sounds like the key to it all is just giving plenty of time.
Yeah, but I would argue like plenty of time and being organised, but aren't they the 2 key things for any wedding anywhere? Like, unless
this is true. This is very true.
So I don't think it's.
But the chances of finding a last minute vendor in Orange is probably a little bit like harder than if maybe scrambling to find one in Melbourne. At least that in Melbourne you'll probably find someone, maybe.
Yes, but that's true. But remember that Orange and the Blue Mountains and Mudgee all still have access to Sydney vendors as well. So if you're like, oh my gosh, my florist has got COVID, she can't, and this is happening all the time at the moment because people have got COVID. We're still restricted by government restrictions where we have to stay at home. So we're actually also connecting with vendors in Sydney, because there is a bigger pool of vendors and everybody's helping each other out. And so people in Sydney that may not have been working that weekend are able to come out and fill in that gap and support the community and support the wedding industry, and it all keeps going. So there's this really beautiful interconnectedness, but we all are also acutely aware that we need to rely on people outside of where we live, particularly on those peak wedding weekends when everybody is booked out.
Yep. Yeah. And one to keep in mind, especially if you are getting married further than 4 hours from Sydney, etc., maybe you're getting married somewhere 10 hours, that you do need to keep that timing really at the top of your mind and try and get stuff done early. Then you can relax for the last 6 months.
Definitely. Look, you can still bring styling and florals and everything from Sydney. It's just going to cost a ton of money. That's it.
Yes. Yep. Are there any hidden gems around that you, as in town-wise, that you love, that you think really should deserve a lot more weddings? Apart from Orange, which, you know, we think is amazing anyway by this chat.
I know. I love Orange. Orange is beautiful. Oh, look, there's so many. There's lots of, I guess with the bigger regional towns, I mean, Orange is reasonably big, but there's only 40,000 people here. There's all these beautiful little villages around. The same with Mudgee, the same with Dubbo. You've got all these gorgeous villages. And there's a little town just outside of Orange called Millthorpe. And Millthorpe's got this beautiful country charm, gorgeous like cobblestone kind of streets, big country pub, beautiful delicatessens, vineyards, whatever. But they also have a hatted restaurant there that does weddings, which is just phenomenal. Like Tonic is beautiful. So like a little country town with a hatted restaurant that does weddings like that, that is an incredible experience. And you're only 15 minutes away from a bigger regional centre. So you've got the accommodation options as well. There's so many. And some of the venues like Waldara out near Oberon is like a destination in itself. It's outside of Oberon, which is a small country town, doesn't have a lot of weddings except on private properties and out at Waldara. But Waldara is a sensational thing that is kind of like, it's this little bubble of wedding awesomeness in the middle of nowhere. And those little pockets of awesomeness really exist everywhere. They really do. And jumping on the polka dot wedding site and really having a look at little venues, jumping on other sites like Wedshed, like using all your connections like Hello May and Nuba and all of these beautiful, beautiful places that list all of these incredible weddings in the country. It might just involve a little bit more digging.
Yep. And I think the hidden gems are what you find when you dig. I think digging, instead of just maybe looking at the top level vendors that you see in every single wedding, there are such hidden vendors and venues and towns that just do amazing stuff that maybe don't get as much fanfare.
Oh, so much, so much. And one of my favourite venues is this tiny little old historic building called Collett's Inn in Hartley Vale, just on the other side of the Blue Mountains. And Collett's Inn is surrounded by the Blue Mountains escarpment. It's this gorgeous historical house with a purpose-made barn and a little lake. And when you're out there, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, but it's only 15 minutes from Lithgow. And so people stay in the dodgy old motels in Lithgow or the Airbnbs around in Hartley Vale that are a bit more expensive. And then they come into Collett's Inn, and it's this beautiful bubble experience again, I suppose. And those are the types of things that I absolutely love.
And they're so memorable. So they're such a perfect thing for a wedding.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. Again, it's just creating that experience and thinking about it as creating an opportunity to really give your guests a chance to just chill out and relax and have fun and connect with each other and party.
Exactly. What do you love the most about living in the country?
What do I love the most? Oh, I love that I can drive from home to work in less than 15 minutes and I feel like I'm in another world. I used to live in the eastern suburbs in Sydney and work in the northern suburbs, and sometimes it would take me an hour to drive, 7 kilometres. Yeah. There's no traffic out here, like none at all. It's amazing. So
Such
good for the soul.
After Sydney.
So good for the soul. And I remember initially being worried that I wouldn't have as much to do because, particularly in Sydney, you have access to everything all of the time and there's that overstimulation, it's almost too much choice. But out here, there's so much to do and it's just a matter of doing things when they're available, I suppose, like making sure you go to the Saturday morning farmers markets once a month, making sure that you go to, you know, the pizza and comedy night at one of the vineyards that's on twice a year, open air cinema, you know, making sure that the things that are on that you engage with and kind of working that way rather than thinking, you know, it's a Saturday night, what am I going to do?
Well, if every listener doesn't pack their bags and move to the country, then I don't know what's going on but after this podcast. But is there any last words of advice you have for couples considering a country wedding, apart from all the golden advice you've already given us?
All the golden advice. I suppose maybe just be really open-minded, you know, like it's impossible to know what to expect until you start doing a bit of research, I suppose. And then once you start getting into this little tunnel of research, all of these like things will just pop up and you're like, oh my gosh, I never knew that we could do that. That's so cool. Or yeah, I'm not really into that, you know, rustic type of wedding, but oh wow, this vineyard is cool. Oh wow, there's these eco cabins down by a river in the middle of nowhere. Let's go and do that. Oh. You know, like there's so many ways to get married and to have a wedding. And when you start like thinking about all these different opportunities that exist and thinking about what's important to you, you know, doing the farm to table stuff or having the full weekend experience, whatever's important to you, just like go with it and start going down that rabbit hole. And I'm guaranteed you will be surprised at how many options there are out in the country that are going to suit exactly what you want.
Well, I think it's just you've sold the country wedding through and through, which is perfect for the country issue. So I'm so thankful for you taking the time to chat to us today. Thank you so much, Kirsten.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been so fun. I feel really passionate about what I do and excited to share it with you all.
I'm really thrilled about our chat. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else you've got in store in beautiful country Orange and all the rave reviews you've just given us. I think everyone will want to go. I want to go. So, you know, tick that box soon.
Please come down. We'll go out to dinner at a Haddon restaurant. Yeah.
Yes. With some wine.
Yes.
Local wine, of course. Farm to table wine.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If there ever should be a paid ambassador for Orange, I'm pretty sure it should be Kirsten. I'm really grateful to her for spending all that time with us today for that chat. You can find more about Kirsten, including how to get to know her, how to book her, and her website over on today's show notes. You'll be able to find them on polkadotwedding.com/podcast. You can also now find us on weddingpodcast.com.au. We've also got a link over there to the country issue where we're sharing country wedding inspiration for the entire month of October and well beyond because, of course, country weddings never stop. And we'll link to that over on the show notes as well. We would love your support as a brand new podcast. We would love your reviews. So hop on over to your favourite podcast platform and do write about us and write about what you thought about today's episode because we would love to know. We are always welcome to your feedback, your contact, your thoughts, your worries, your concerns. So drop us an email on your favourite platform. We're pretty much everywhere, email, Instagram, etc. And we would love to hear from you. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode.